You applied for a big promotion at work, and today was your chance to make a really good impression on the VP. It may have been the biggest presentation of your career, if only you'd been able to rehearse it once more. But you woke up late, realized you hadn't stopped by the dry cleaners to pick up your suit, and as you were walking out the door, you noticed a spot on your collar. Finally, after making it to the office, you sat down to review your notes one more time, and then the client walks in 15 minutes early. So stressful. Everyone experiences stress. Some days are more stressful than others. But imagine trying to deal with everyday stressors while simultaneously trying to cope with a mental illness or a mental disorder such as anxiety or depression, schizophrenia, ADHD, or bipolar disorder. How can you maintain or improve your well-being under such conditions? I belong to a research group which studies stigma in the marketplace. More specifically, my colleagues and I, all marketing academicians, examine how stigmatized consumers face challenges in the marketplace or use the marketplace as a coping resource. So what do I mean by stigma? Well, nearly 60 years ago, famed sociologist Irving Goffman published a book called Stigma: Notes on the Management of Spoiled Identity, in which he defines stigma as an attribute which is deeply discredited by society. In other words, people possessing a stigmatized attribute are rejected or disqualified from full social acceptance because they are different somehow. The project I'm talking about today looks at consumers with a diagnosable mental illness or mental disorder and how the stigma impacts their day-to-day activities, their consumption activities to be specific. So 4 questions arise. 1, how do consumers deal with the stress of finding appropriate solutions for their mental disorder, such as securing, evaluating, and understanding diagnoses and treatments? 2, how do these consumers react to the stress from conducting everyday activities made challenging by their disorders, such as managing symptoms and emphasizing their own strengths? 3, how do they handle the stress from managing a stigmatized identity associated with a disorder that they have been diagnosed with? Things like concealing their symptoms and gaining social acceptance. And finally, what role does the marketplace play? Does it exacerbate the stigma and stress, or is it a coping resource these consumers can use to improve their well-being? Well-being suffers when the demands of a stressful life event exceed an individual's perceived ability to cope with it. And coping is a complex, dynamic process. First, an individual determines whether important goals have been harmed or threatened. Second, the person appraises whether or not she can access the internal and external stress management resources. Coping strategies are typically categorized as either problem-focused or emotion-focused, and more than 400 strategies have been identified over the years. Many of these strategies implicitly presume consumers seek to restore damaged self-esteem, a tenet which underlies much of contemporary psychology. However, in the past half-decade or so, some research has suggested other goals, such as exploring self-compassion, might be a more valuable target of coping tactics. To learn more about how people cope with stigma, we interviewed 33 people who either had a mental illness or had a family member with a mental illness. We found people coped to meet 3 different goals, all related to protecting their self-concept and their well-being. Those are self-esteem, self-efficacy, and self-compassion. The most effective coping tactics would depend on the goal they are pursuing. The first self-concept goal is to restore damaged self-esteem. Self-esteem is a subjective evaluation of one's value. It involves feelings of pride and self-worth generated by comparing actual perceptions of oneself with desired perceptions. Many coping strategies assume restoring self-esteem to be the focus and the goal. And indeed, we found that parents of some children with mental disorders, reported buying expensive brands of sneakers and clothing and trendy accessories in order to improve their children's feelings of self-worth. External validation and effective impression management techniques leading to improved self-esteem was often achieved through the use of social media. And we found that disengagement to coping strategies such as denial, withdrawal from the situation and marketplace, and escapism were tactics that consumers seeking self-esteem used. Basically, strategies to achieve self-esteem goals allowed consumers to mentally escape their situation. However, the pursuit of self-esteem carries long-term mental and physical health costs. To put it simply, it's simply exhausting. The next goal is self-efficacy. Self-efficacy refers to the subjective beliefs consumers hold about their abilities. That is, the skills that people obtain, practice, and master. And there are many ways the marketplace helps support self-efficacy. Having access to medication or knowledgeable service providers dramatically increased informants' beliefs in their ability to concentrate, to manage symptoms, and to successfully navigate life. By using consumer goods in novel ways or pre-preparing for shopping trips using technology apps or taking advantage of low stimulation hours at various stores or entertainment venues, the informant's perception of self-efficacy increased and contributed to their overall well-being. The third self-concept goal is self-compassion. Self-compassion is the act of being kind, caring, and understanding to oneself. Self-compassion says you are worth it, and your self-worth is not dependent upon comparison to others or achieving some level of success, as is the case with self-esteem. The marketplace includes many options for consumers to practice self-compassion. In addition to self-gifting, meditation apps, journals, and even some treatment choices allowed our consumer informants to gain better understanding of their mental disorders, connect with others, engage in activities which normalize mental disorders, such as sharing their stories with others via social media, community presentations, blogs, and media interviews. All of these actions promoted self-kindness and understanding. Living with and managing a stigmatized identity is often a lifelong, arduous journey without simple or permanent solutions or destinations. In the beginning stages of managing stressful situations, consumers might utilize strategies to protect their self-esteem. Over time, however, these strategies may become less satisfying, so they engage in strategies to boost their self-efficacy. Then, after learning more about their conditions, acquiring necessary skills, experiencing security in their identities, and connecting with similar others, self-compassion goals become the focal point.